As we work with statistics, we want to understand how to get the least amount of bias in our sampling. To sample means to go to the population and take out certain individuals or things, look at those, find the information for those, and then get the data for those pieces. So sampling is to select members of the population and then what we want to do is we want to avoid bias. So avoid bias by carefully selecting a method. You don't want the data to be skewed one way or another because you didn't do your due diligence in selecting a good sample method. So let's talk about the different sampling methods. Stratified sampling, this is where we divide the population into groups with similar characteristics. Divide into groups with similar characteristics. And then in each of those groups, you do a random sample. This is to make sure that you get members from each of the different groups. So an example for this is to separate by age. If you want to make sure that every group is represented, you go ahead and separate by age and then do a random sample from each of those. So that would be a stratified sample of making this, each stratified area based on age. Cluster sampling is where you just go and you look at the population and look for convenient clusters. So for instance, at a school, you might look for classrooms. You might go to different classrooms, just select the entire classroom. Okay, so find a convenient cluster of the population and survey the entire cluster. So an example of this would be choosing classrooms at a school. All right, the next one, is systemic sampling. This is where you go ahead and you, for instance, take the whole population, you start at a random place, and then you systemically pick, for instance, like the third person of that population. So start with a random member of the population and then use a rule to select more members. This is usually where you have a list of the members of a population, and then you just go down and you select, for instance, the third member. So example, start with the fifth person, and then every third person after. All right, these last two here, you got to be very careful with these. These have an extreme risk for bias. So that's what's going to go in the box for these two. High risk of bias. These are the ones that oftentimes people will use because they're easy to do, and oftentimes they lead to skewed or bad data because they're very biased in how they're sampled. So convenience sampling is only choosing members of the population close to you. So as an example, that might be in a classroom. You might have just pick the students that are in your group. So, or pick students at your lunch table. Oftentimes these folks share a lot of characteristics, and so it's not very random. And then lastly, self-selected sampling is where you ask for volunteers. From the population. This again could lead to bias because you could have some people that are highly motivated to be involved in the study that might not be, might bring some bias to them. So these are the ways we would sample. So once you select a type of study, this is how you would take and find a sample of the population, and when you do it, try to avoid bias by making it as random as possible.